do that. I'd personally like to see some sort of entity created where you could seed it with about $50 billion of capital, and then use that for about $700 or $800 billion through loan guarantees and leverage infrastructure investments across a broad class of infrastructure for a decade, and have it be revolving, have it go forever. It's like a bank, you don't call it a bank. That's what it is. And there are other programs like the WIFI program I mentioned, which is, for folks who don't know, this is it's a federal loan program essentially. And there are ways to be creative. I would like to see governors have some optionality around taking private investment in some of their state assets, like the New York Lottery, which is a massive asset, which you could IPO a piece of it, you could lease concession part of it. If you could allow governors to do these things, if they redirected those investments to long-term wealth creation, education, infrastructure in this case. I think if you cobble together enough good ideas, you can get up to a number that makes sense. But then, of course, we're also just making choices, right? I mean, you know, if you want to invade the country of Iraq, it's an $800 billion price tag, and $3 trillion over the next 25 years to take care of all the guys who serve so honorably, right? So that's a choice we're making. That's, you know, there's my 5% of GDP for 20 years, right? So we did on that instead of building our own country. So how are we paying for that? Well, right, we put it on the credit card, and now we're all paying for it. So all I'm saying is that again, you start with fiscal discipline, but we also have to be mindful of the fact that our grandparents and our parents had a much more expansive view of what they could do and what they could build. And they invested in it, and they made good decisions. And we have all benefited from that. And we have the same obligation, and we know how to do this. We just need the will and the imagination to do it. And what I've said and what we've said about this short-term gimmick is we'll support any reasonable funding on it. Now, see, the worst thing you can do in Washington is have a bunch of people go out and say they're going to, you know, raise the tax, and then get nothing done. You just get your head handed to you, and you don't have any achievement, right? So the way to do this thing is to get everybody in a room, agree on a bunch of unpleasant stuff, and have them strike a deal and hold hands and go in together in a bipartisan way and pass it about 5 minutes later. And then we'll all go out and you know, have to do our jobs, which should tell you that, you know, we make smart investments. If you want to vote me out of office for it, then God bless you. You know, I mean, but I think that, but until we get an agreement to stop kicking the can down the road, it makes little sense to have people hanging out there on politically dangerous stuff, and it will limit the number of members we can bring to the table. We had 200 members sign a letter saying we want a long-term fix. This letter is saying, and we won't vote for a short-term one. It's a big escalation of that. We're doing that this week, today. So I'll let you know how it goes. My guess is we'll probably fall a little short, and I'll kick the can down the road for a couple of months. The point is there's a core of bipartisan members now who are really committed to fixing this long term. And it will involve some painful solutions. But they're not really painful if it makes sense, are they? Right? Any more than saving for retirement is painful, or right? No. Paying your kids' tuition bill is painful, but there's a lot to it, hopefully. I'd like to think so, it's Father. Another question? Oh, I'm sorry, didn't see you say.
Getting back to the federal money that trickles down to the state for water and sewer issues, in the ranking and rating criteria that towns and villages have to compete with, if you have a compliance order or some sort of environmental issue, you get extra points, which there's some logic to that. But I also work with a lot of communities who have capital plans, who have asset management plans, who are taking care of their water and sewer, but they still have needs, and they don't rank as high in the competition for the scarce funds. And I know there's been some discussion, particularly in the State Environmental Facilities Corporation and other venues. USDA was raised as an issue to change that so people get rewarded for taking care of the investments that they're making. I'm just wondering if that's come up in your travels.
No, it has not. Again, we advocate very often for communities that feel like they're not getting the attention they deserve, so we're always happy to do that on any individual community. Just call my office and we'll get the game to you. We'll write a letter, we'll push, we'll call. We can actually be very effective sometimes on that. I will tell you, I'm very interested in incentives in American infrastructure. I think that we We could certainly use them more powerfully on the federal level to corral the states into more intelligent legislation, particularly on things like P3s. You could, for example, on big programs like the Pt2 program, where it's being used to fund the Tappan Zee Bridge, we could increase the size of that program, but make certain access to additional layers of that program available only to states that have smart authorizing legislation. Things that reinforce best practices and that get project delivery methods aligned with the most efficient way to do it. And I'd be happy to look at if we've got incentives reversed on some of those programs as well. I haven't spent a lot of time on this, but it's part of what I'm working on right now in the new bill is creating a center of excellence on this in the Department of Transportation, have expertise within DOT on leveraging private capital, and then trying to propagate best practices more, types of investments, types of projects where we've seen P3 work best. And because a lot of people are interested in this, but there's very little expertise right now in a lot of communities, and a lack of resources to develop that expertise. We can do that at the federal level and help folks. Look at that. We exhausted the questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share with you